Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Frank Tomaino is our guest, and whenever we have Frank in, we talk about local history, and that's what we're going to do today. Among other topics, we'll talk about the old textile mills in Utica, and Utica's fire department, and before we do any of that, though, I want to say welcome. Good to see you again.
Yep, great to be here, Joe.
Hey, you know what? The last time you were on the show, a month or two ago, we were talking about hospitals.
Yes.
And we ended the show talking about all the hospitals that were in Utica, and you named them all, except for one. You couldn't think of it. I couldn't think of it. And the thing that amazed me is that not that you couldn't think of it, or not that I couldn't think of it, but that we both couldn't think of it at the same time. Yeah. And I've gotten enough phone calls about the name of the hospital. I mean, I knew it. I just couldn't remember it.
Yeah, when after that program, when I left the studio, got in the car, and in my mind, I'm traveling through Utica, knowing that I forgot a major hospital.
Yeah.
You know? Finally, I'm on Burstone Road, and I got to Sunset, and I said, Faxton Hospital.
Yeah.
I can't believe
Yeah.
that I forgot Faxton Hospital.
Well, I can't believe I forgot it as well. But Faxton got its name from Theodore Faxton.
Theodore Faxton, who built the hospital and donated it to the citizens of Utica in 1874-75. So it's one of the oldest hospitals in this area. And Theodore Faxton, I always mention when we talk about Helen Munson Williams, she deserves a statue on the Parkway. Yeah. So does Theodore Faxton, believe me, and his buddy John Butterfield, who were together in a lot of ventures. It you could write a book on just those two.
How did Faxton? I know how Butterfield. Maybe we'll talk about Butterfield in a second. I know how Butterfield made his money, but how about Faxton? Well,
Faxton almost the same as Butterfield. Butterfield later, with stagecoaches. Both of them started as stagecoach drivers. Faxton in Utica used to drive from Utica to Albany, and we're talking in the early 1800s. And he had the reputation of being the best, and he had the fastest stagecoach. He knew the road, the potholes and everything, and he was able to. And at the same time, a man named John Butterfield in Albany drove a stagecoach north to Saratoga Springs, and he had a reputation of being the best. So one day, Jason Parker, who owned the stagecoach company in Utica, was talking with Theodore Faxton and said, the next time you're in Albany, why not, we all know about this John Butterfield, and they were both in their early 20s. Maybe you convince him to come to Utica and work for me. Faxton met Butterfield, and to make a long story short, they talked, and he convinced him, Butterfield, to settle in Utica. And they both drove stagecoaches, so they were both stagecoach drivers.
And then they went into business for themselves.
Well, yeah, and then, Faxton took over when Parker retired. He took over the business. But Butterfield and Faxton were together in a lot of ventures. They owned packet boats on the Erie Canal and also Lake Ontario. They had a steamship company that ran boats up and down the St. Lawrence and Lake Ontario. They were interested in speed, the fastest stagecoach, and they were interested in railroads. Faxton was one of the founders of the Utica Black River Railroad, and became president after a while. But they liked the fastest trains, everything, speed. So when Samuel F.B. Morse came to Utica and told him, boy, you could send messages across the country in seconds, wow. So both Butterfield and Faxton invested money in Morse's first electromagnetic telegraph. So two fascinating guys, and they also invested in textile mills.
Yeah, we'll talk about textile mills later today. But when you mention Morse, S.B. Morse, that's where we got the Morse code, yes?
Oh yeah, Morse code. He invented, and he spent a lot of time in Utica, not only because Faxton and Butterfield were not the only ones, but they were helping to finance it. And Faxton, in fact, Morse spent some time in number 3 Rector Park, staying overnight there. And Morse, when he was working on his telegraph, needed what they call a sounder. I guess the best way, if anybody who's seen old westerns, that's the little that goes dee 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 dee.
Yeah.
And that was invented by I'm forgetting his first name now, Chubbuck, Samuel Chubbuck, who was a mechanic. He had a shop on Lower Genesee Street, and was a very talented guy. And Morse explained what he wanted, and Chubbuck came up with it. So Morse had, in fact, after his first wife died, Morse's second wife was a woman from Utica. So, and I think his son married a Utica woman too. So a lot of connections, mainly because of Faxton and Butterfield.
Mm-hmm.
Samuel F.B. Morse, you know, is connected to Utica history.
Where did he go? Where did Morse go on to when he left Utica, Frank?
You know, I really don't know. I think it was in the Baltimore area.
Because he wasn't here that long, was he?
No, well, a few years.
Yeah.
You know, in the 1840s, I think his telegraph, the first successful telegraph, I think was in the 1848 or 49. But of course, he was also an artist. Samuel F.B. Morse was more famous at that time as a portrait artist. But we know him now, you know, again, the Morse code. But Faxton and Butterfield, in fact, Morse was having a tough time. They needed the wires for the telegraph, and he come up with the idea with an iron wire, but he was afraid it would rust unless it was, you know, insulated. But it was Faxton, of course, the legend. He was walking along Catherine Street, and there was a house there, had been there for years, with a wire fence, with an iron wire fence. It had been there 25 years, and Faxton noticed it never rusted. So he talked to Morse and convinced Morse to use iron, which was less expensive than copper. To make a long story short, Faxton was involved in all of this. Quite a guy.
And you know, you mentioned they were all interested in speed, and Butterfield had a test of speed, which we'll talk about when we come back. Frank Tomaino is our guest. Short break, right back.